I absolutely adore the Fate franchise, and Fate Samurai Remnant is looking like it's going to be an amazing addition to it. And because I'm so utterly hyped for this game, I decided I would go through and look at all the new servants and figure out who they are before the game comes out. I have no clue if most of these characters have had their identities revealed somewhere. If they are, I have no clue. Anyhow, let's dive right in and figure out who these 8 new servants are. First up, we have the servant of Miyamoto Iori, Saber. Now, we'll see that a bunch of the new servants seem to be pretty obvious on who they are, and Saber definitely falls into that category. Even from the first teaser trailer, we can see that they really are trying to make this Saber a lot like the one from Fate Stay Night. And as I'm sure most of you know by this point, Saber in Fate Stay Night would happen to be King Arthur. Well, it just so happens that there's a legend in Japan that's considered Arthurian. So, what's this Japanese Arthurian legend? Well, that'd be the tale of Yamato Takeda. The main similarity we can point out here is, just like Arturia has the legendary sword Excalibur, Saber here looks like they have the legendary Kusanagi. Supporting this, in several of the trailers, we see that Saber has some control over water, specifically regarding their sword. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Kusanagi was found by the storm god Susanoo. The sword of a storm god having power over water doesn't seem too far-fetched. Yamato Takeda is one of the few people actually known to have used the sword. So yeah, we actually do have a fair bit of evidence on who this could be. The main thing is, it really does seem like they do want to contrast this Saber with Arturia. Either way, Saber looks great, still not sure on the gender, really excited to see more of them in the game. And next up we have Zheng Chenggong, sorry for any mispronunciations, and his servant Archer. One thing that has to be considered is that most of the masters are also people who are found in actual history, like Zheng Chenggong here. As we can see in his biography, he's the son of a Ming merchant and a Japanese mother, so essentially half Chinese, half Japanese, which does give us a bit of a clue as to who his Archer could be. The most common theory on who this could be I saw was Hou Yi, an archer who shot down 8 of the 9 sons. Issue is, this archer doesn't really have anything to suggest the sun. No sun symbology on it, which is kind of something you'd expect a design of that person to have. One other option I considered was Yue Fei, not really for any particular reason, just because they're a famous Chinese archer. On seeing the opening of the game, I think it becomes pretty clear that this is in fact Zhou Yu, or Shunyu Koken. In the opening, we can see him standing over what looks to be a bunch of burning ships. This is actually depicting an event from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, from which Zhou Yu is derived. Alright, third, we have Chiemon and his servant Lancer. Now, I'm sure at least one person's wondering, why are you talking about Lancer? That's a pretty well-known character, isn't it? And yeah, she does look like Jeanne d'Arc Alter. But there's a few key differences, specifically in personality, it seems. But before discussing that, let's actually talk about her master, Chiemon. His biography describes him as a mysterious man with many layers of cloth wrapped around his face. He is a survivor of the Great Rebellion that once took place in Shimabara Amakusa. For those of you who don't know about the Shimabara Rebellion, the Shimabara Rebellion was essentially a group of Christians in Japan rebelling against the shogunate because of their poor treatment. And what makes this important is I think this ties into the identity of this Lancer. Rather than being Jeanne d'Arc herself, I think it's a vengeful spirit of sorts combined with her spirit origin. As to who these vengeful spirits could be, I suggest that this servant will be referred to as Martyr, taking a cue from the martyrs of Japan, who, similarly to those in the Shimabara Rebellion, were Christians persecuted in Japan. So my guess is that those resentful and mournful emotions have taken form and combined with Jeanne d'Arc to create this new Lancer. With a scene from the opening, it does seem like they're just trying to play it straight. This is just Jeanne d'Arc, or another form of her at least. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case, but I'm still holding to my theory of this being Martyr, or at least connected in some way. Next up, we have Yui Shosetsu and Ryder. Once again, I think the Master might actually be the key to cracking the identity. There is one popular theory on who Ryder could be I'll go over first. Now, as you can see there, the voice actor for the character is completely marked out, and the character design draft was done by Ryder. Now, if you don't know, Ryder is a fairly divisive character designer in Fate Grand Order. Their most popular servant probably being Raiko, who happens to be the topic of this theory. Now, because the character voice is scratched out, and we do get a look at what Ryder looks like under the armor in the opening, some people have put out the idea that this is in fact a Raiko Lily of sorts. And while I'm not sure on that exactly, The fact of the matter is they use extremely similar purple lightning like Raiko does. However, this symbol that appears on their armor happens to be the symbol of the Takeda clan. The Takeda clan is a famous clan of warriors in Japanese history. Before diving into my theory on who Ryder is, though, I want to discuss the Master for a moment. Yui Shosetsu is someone who eventually goes on to rebel against the Shogunate, and I believe that's going to be one of the biggest revealing factors to their servant, as I personally believe that that servant is Takeda Nobuyoshi, one of the earliest members of the Takeda clan and someone who lost their son at an assassination plot by the Shogun. So I could definitely see this version of them having a grudge against the Shogun because of that event. I think it makes sense. The Master will eventually rebel against the Shogunate, and the servant is someone who was screwed over pretty hard by the Shogunate. I won't be surprised if this just turns out to be another version of Raiko, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did turn out to be Takeda Nobuyoshi. And next up, we have the most likely antagonist of the game. Would you trust this? Does this look trustworthy to you? So, one of the most notable things about Caster is the fact that on the back of their outfit, you can see a Buddhist lotus. This, partnered with the fact that he has some creepy looking abilities we can see from the trailers, I believe this is Devadatta, an evil figure from early Buddhism. I don't have a lot of evidence behind this one, but the fact that the character design was done by Paco, who did most of the Indian servants, does add a little credence to this theory, I believe. Either way, Caster, there's not a particular lot going on with Caster, so if I'm wrong, not surprising. And now we have Assassin, whose identity is actually pretty obvious. Without a single doubt in my mind, this is Kogasaburo. Kogasaburo is famous for having wandered into a cave and emerged a serpent. Or in the case of Fate, a man who stepped on a white snake and was cursed by Orochi, giving him these snake-like qualities we see here. We can see in several of the trailers that he has the power to summon snakes, specifically white snakes, which the Yamato Orochi is commonly depicted as. As far as his design goes, he's got a bunch of lines running around him. He's got those scaly bits of armor on him. His button things up there just look like snake eyes, and we even see what looks like a snake curled around his arms. So yeah, there's really no one who'd scream snakes more than Kogasaburo, so that's Kogasaburo. No real doubts about that. For the next servant we don't know, we have the Rogue Saber, and the first thing I want to bring up about the Rogue Saber is his character designer, Shirabe. Shirabe has worked on one specific character in Fate before, being Tomoe Gozen. The Rogue Saber's armor is heavily reminiscent of Tomoe Gozen. He wears an Oni mask, and Tomoe is an Oni, or at least descended from Oni. So I believe this is her son, who according to one source is Asahina Yoshihide. Now there's really not a lot to discuss because we don't know much about this character at all. All we know is they're pursuing someone they call the Evil Ogre, but there's really no mention of this as far as I can tell in Japanese myth or history. We're kind of in the dark on this one, but because of the similarities between the armors and who the character designer is, the fact of the matter is the only two options I really think this could be would be Tomoe's husband or son. I'm putting all my chips on it being her son though, as I think that might be the reason for the Oni mask, to pay homage to his mother. And for our final servant, the Rogue Berserker, I think this is actually pretty obvious. Between the bulging muscles, the shackles on his wrist, and the long flowing hair, the only person I can think of this being is Samson. For those of you who don't know, Samson, super strong man who is going to keep his strength as long as he never cut his hair. His outfit does look right for that time period, and I can't think of many other warriors described as having super long hair. And to reinforce this, we have the woman he chooses to accompany, Takao Dayu. Takao Dayu also happens to be the master of the other Berserker, Musashi Miyamoto in this case. One part of Samson's legend involves his wife cutting off his hair to rob him of his strength. So Samson hanging around Takao Dayu seems like it'd make perfect sense here. And yeah, that's it. That's all I have to discuss in terms of new servants. I'm really looking forward to Samurai Remnant. All of the new servants have really great designs. There's not a single miss in here. They all just look phenomenal. So hey, if you're from the future, please tell me, just how stupid was I for thinking these? How dumb were my theories here? Or if I got them right, I wouldn't mind a good job. Pat on the back. Anyhow, thanks for listening to my insane ramblings. Goodbye.